Imagine your supplier sends you a perfectly normal invoice. This invoice went through KSeF, the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System. It also has a KSeF number. Your software pulled it in automatically. Everything looks fine. And yet, without anyone touching a thing, that one invoice just turned a dozen or even a more thousand zloty of your input VAT receivable from the tax office into a minus. Instead of getting money back, your company is now reporting that it owes more. Today I'll show you exactly how that may happen, why a foreign currency invoice is where it may bite, and the simple check that catches it before it costs you. This is a real case example based on one of my clients' case. Hi, my name is Michał. I am a Polish licensed tax advisor and I provide accounting, cost calculation, tax compliance and tax advisory services for small and medium-sized businesses in Poland. Today's topic comes straight from a real case, though I've changed all the numbers and of course removed everything that could identify the involved parties. What matters is the mechanism itself, and that mechanism can hit anyone. So here's the plan. First, the one rule about foreign currency invoices that's easy to forget. Then the actual defect, namely how euros and zlotys got swapped on the invoice. Then the interesting part, the step-by-step logic the software followed to turn a normal purchase into a large negative VAT figure. Then the problem it creates, several of them, hitting two different taxes in opposite direction. And finally, the practical checks that catch it. Okay, so let's set the scene. A lot of Polish businesses buy from abroad, but also from local suppliers who invoice them in euros. That's completely normal. The parties can agree that the price is set in a foreign currency, in a currency other than Polish zloty. But the Polish VAT law has a one firm rule about it, and that's the key in this whole story. You are allowed to express all the values on the invoice in euros or in other foreign currency, namely the net amount, the VAT amount, as well as the gross amount. But additionally to that, the VAT amount always has to be also indicated in the Polish zloty. And in order to express the VAT amount in zloty on the invoice, the VAT amount expressed in the foreign currency is recalculated using the official rate published by the National Bank of Poland. Why? Because you declare and pay your Polish VAT to the tax office in zloty, and consequently you also deduct your input VAT in zloty. So every foreign currency invoice really carries two sets of figures: the commercial amounts in euros and the tax amount, the VAT amount, converted into zloty. And also here quick definitions, because I will use these terms throughout. Output VAT is what the seller indicates on the invoice and owes to the tax office. Input VAT is the VAT amount you pay on your purchases and which, as a registered business, you normally get to deduct. And KSeF, the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System, is the government platform that, as of February and April 2026, Polish businesses use to issue and receive invoices. Hold on to that idea of input VAT being something you deduct, because that's where the damage shows up. And now the invoice itself. Picture a simple purchase. To keep the maths clean, let me use round made-up numbers and an exchange rate of exactly 4 zloty to 1 euro. So the real deal is this. The net amount is equal to 1,000 euros, which, assuming the mentioned exchange rate of 4 to 1, is 4,000 zloty. The VAT amount at the rate of 23% is 230 euros, which is equal to 920 zloty. And the gross amount is 1,230 euros, which is equal to 4,920 zloty. And that's it, nothing exotic. The buyer should be able to deduct 920 zloty of input VAT. simple. Now, every structured invoice, meaning that every invoice issued via the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System, has a summary block near the bottom. A little table that for each VAT rate lists the net amount, the VAT amount and the gross amount, all of them expressed in euros. And additionally, there is also one dedicated field, one dedicated column for the VAT amount expressed in zloty. That VAT field exists precisely because of the rule we just covered. Here is where it went wrong. On this invoice, the columns got their currencies crossed. The fields that were supposed to show the values in euro, the net amount, the VAT amount, the gross amount, all three indicated in euros, were instead filled by the entity issuing the invoice with zloty figures. Namely, the net amount equal to 4,000 instead of 1,000, the VAT amount equal to 920 instead of 230, and the gross amount equal to 4,920 instead of 1,230. And the one last field that was supposed to show the VAT amount in zloty, namely 920 zloty, was instead filled with the VAT amount in euros, namely 230 euros. And that's exactly the whole problem. Every currency on that summary is in the wrong box. The euro slots hold zloty and the zloty slot holds euros. To a human glancing at it, the numbers all look like money, so nothing screams wrong. But to a machine, to a software that's told this invoice is in euros, those mislabeled figures are a loaded trap. This is the part I really want you to see, because it's so logical, it's almost beautiful, but in a horrifying way. The software didn't malfunction, it did exactly what it was told. Let me walk the steps. Step 1, the program reads the total amount due, which is 1,230 euros, and converts this into zloty at the rate of 4 to 1. And this gives 4,920 zloty gross amount. That's perfect, this part is correct. In step 2, the program needs the net amount in zloty. Therefore, it looks at the field in the summary and it sees 4,000, where actually it should stand 1,000. And here is the fatal assumption. The invoice says this invoice is in euros. So the software treats those 4,000 as 4,000 euros and dutifully converts it into zloty. It takes 4,000 times 4 equals 16,000 zloty of net amount. Do you see what just happened? Those 4,000 were already in zloty. The software converted it for the second time. So as a result, we can say that the exchange rate was double applied. The net amount of 4,000 zloty silently ballooned into the net amount of 16,000 zloty. And in step 3, the program does the final innocent piece of arithmetic. In this step, in order to calculate the VAT amount, the program takes the gross amount minus the net amount. So the gross amount is 4,920, the net amount is 16,000, so consequently the VAT amount is minus 11,080 zloty instead of 920 zloty, which would be correct. So stop and sit with that. The company was entitled to deduct 920 zloty as input VAT, but as a result of a incorrectly issued invoice, the software, following a flawless logic on corrupted data, instead booked minus 11,080 zloty of VAT amount. And that's not a small error. It flipped the sign and changed the size completely. One field mislabeled, and the deduction didn't just shrink, it reversed and exploded. And here's the lesson. The software wasn't stupid. The rule implemented in this software, namely take the net amount in euros, convert it into zlotys, and derive the VAT amount as the gross amount minus the net amount is perfectly reasonable for a real euro invoice, which is correctly issued. Good logic met bad data, and that gives you a confident, precise, but completely wrong answer. So what's the damage? Let's start with the obvious one. The negative VAT, namely the mentioned minus 11,080 zloty, goes into your VAT return. So consequently, instead of adding additional 920 zloty to your deductible input VAT, this entry, this invoice, subtracts 11,080 zloty. So consequently, the total amount of your input VAT indicated in the VAT return is decreased by 11,080 zloty instead of being increased by 920 zloty. The swing against you is the full distance between those two amounts, 12,000 zloty in this small example, and on bigger invoices, tens or hundreds of thousands of zloty or even more. In plain terms, you under-deduct. You hand the tax office more VAT than you actually owe. Or, on the other hand, you shrink the amount of VAT refund that is receivable for you. It's your money sitting on the wrong side of the ledger because of the one incorrectly issued invoice. And here is the part most people stop at. They say, okay, I under-deduct, I will fix it. But this single defect causes several problems, and they all pull in different directions. The second problem is that such incorrectly issued invoice and an invoice which was additionally, as a consequence of that, incorrectly inputted by the software, corrupts also the income tax settlement in the opposite direction. Remember that net amount that the software inflated from 4,000 zloty to 16,000 zloty? If that inflated net amount also feeds your expense ledger, namely the cost side of your books, then you've now recorded a cost that is 4 times bigger than what it in reality is. So on the VAT side, you understated. However, on the income tax side, you might overstate your tax deductible cost. So the very same error can leave you owing too much VAT and too little income tax at the same time. But these mistakes don't cancel out. They corrupt two separate tax settlements in two opposite directions. The third problem is that, at least when it comes to VAT, all of that may stick out in the tax office's cross-checks, but the tax office might not necessarily be intended to clear this up, because if somehow, due to the implemented software logic at the side of the seller, this incorrectly issued invoice was still correctly transferred to the seller's VAT return and the seller's VAT settlement was calculated correctly, the tax office will see this mismatch, namely the fact that the purchaser is deducting far less than he is in reality entitled to based on this invoice, but the tax office might not necessarily contact the purchaser in order to correct his VAT settlement, because this incorrect settlement is to the benefit of the national treasury, and at the side of the purchaser it is only his right to deduct input VAT, it's not his obligation. So he is also entitled to deduct less than it is indicated on the invoice. So how can you protect yourself against such cases? I think you do not have to be a software engineer. What is necessary are a few sanity checks, especially when it comes to this topic on the foreign currency invoices, which is where the whole class of such errors lives. Whenever an invoice is issued in a foreign currency, slow down. That might be the danger zone. The zloty conversion is exactly where things get crossed. Run the basic identity. In a single currency, net plus VAT should equal gross. And if suddenly the net amount dwarfs the gross amount, something might have been converted twice, as exactly in the example I am describing. Look also at the input VAT amount your software recognized. If it's negative on a normal purchase invoice, not a correcting invoice, but a normal purchase invoice, or widely large, then stop. Also, sanity check the VAT amount in zloty against the net amount in zloty. At 23% VAT rate, compare the net amount your software booked against what actually was paid for the invoice. If the recorded cost is several times bigger than what was paid for the whole invoice, the exchange rate might have been, but not necessarily, but might have been applied twice, exactly as in the example I am describing. Also, it might be helpful to check the first foreign currency invoice received from each new supplier, and or, if you are aware of that, from each new invoicing setup, from each new invoicing software. These errors might be systematic. If one comes through wrong, the next one from the same source may probably too. There might be also other measures aiming at identifying such errors. If you might have some other solutions, I would be glad to hear about them in the comments below. I think it's very reasonable to implement such measures because we're potentially talking about a real payoff. You keep the VAT you are entitled to, and you keep your income tax settlement correct. And potentially, who knows, you stay away of tax office's anomaly list. Okay, this is all from me in this video. Check your invoices, trust the mathematics over the appearance, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.